Chapter 854, The Ooze of Carnage. At the estate, we were watching TV and playing card games. We were also petting our pets and the huskies. They were cute. Ben came down. Ben, hey guys, we're gonna go to Mr. Smoothie. You all want to come? Me, sure Ben. Ben, hey, Sheen. We're going to Mr. Smoothie. Wanna come? Sheen, sure Ben. We were heading out to Mr. Smoothie. *****. In the middle of the city, we were walking over to Mr. Smoothie. Me, so Ben, you guys have been to Mr. Smoothie several times from what we were told. Ben, oh yeah JD. The smoothies are delicious. Kevin Levin, they are good. We're frequent customers at Mr. Smoothie and we get good smoothies there. Me, sounds like you guys had some good times there. Gwen T, we sure did. Julie Y, yep. Ben told me the history of Mr. Smoothie. *****. The grand opening of Mr. Smoothie in Bellwood was presented in a flashback an age old from the past when Ben was 11 years old and did not like smoothies. 4 to 5 years later, Ben became infamous for drinking numerous amounts of them whenever he goes to Mr. Smoothie, drinking a collection of strange flavors, only to burp unpleasantly loud. In Vreedle, the Vreedle brothers destroyed Mr. Smoothie. In Charm's Way, the restaurant's iconic mascot was brought to life, only to be drunk dry by Merc Upchug. Mr. Smoothie was again destroyed in Greetings from Tekadon, but was rebuilt by the More Things Change, Part 1. Since so long, and thanks for all the smoothies, after the universe is destroyed by the Anihai and recreated by Alien X, in the new version of the universe, Mr. Smoothie's mascot, colors, and logo are different. *****. Me, wow. You guys are really well known there. Alan, yep. Manny, it's a good place too. Kyan, I've never been to Mr. Smoothie. I'll have to try it. Overkill, thanks for letting me join you guys. Me, no problem Overkill. We arrived at Mr. Smoothie. It was a really cool juice bar and it was a cool one. G1 Jazz, so this is Mr. Smoothie's? Ben, yep. Team Omnitrix's home away from home. We laughed. Starman, Mega Man, how many flavors does Mr. Smoothie's have? Ben, they have a lot of flavors. Kevin Levin, over 10,000 flavors and a huge number of combos to pick from. Me, that's cool. We went in and we ordered our smoothies. We got them and they were delicious. Me, slurps, MMM. These are good. I like the blue raspberry and mint flavor. It's good. Nico, they sure have all kinds of good flavors though. I like the strawberry and vanilla. May, me too Nico. Lincoln, I like the orange creamsicle flavor. It's tasty. Kyan, I like the blueberry and kale. It's good. Katara, tries a smoothie, this is actually good. I like the strawberry, orange, banana flavor. They sure are good. Me, I think we may have a new summer cool down spot. We laughed. Kate L, that was really clever using your Omnitrix to flush out the thing, JD. Me, thanks Kate. I'm glad we've now seen the last of the horrifying nightmare of the thing. That monstrous creature destroyed many lives. Nico, yep. It sure has. Megan, that creature was a monster. It deserved to be destroyed and erased forever. Me, yep. But what really shocked me was that it was a fusion of 10,000,000 plus aliens from all over the universe. Now we have a massive menagerie of aliens in our arsenals. Ben, we sure do. Bella, yep. Lana, that was still a terrifying adventure though. Lola, it sure was. Lainey, it's just absolutely terrible that the thing can cause that kind of psychological mayhem. Lisa, indeed. Me, yet. We were having a good time at Mr. Smoothie. *****. Back at the estate, we were watching one of my dad's favorite movies from his past, The Blob. It was the one from 1958. In a small rural Pennsylvania town in July 1957, teenager Steve Andrews, Steve McQueen, and his girlfriend, Jane Martin, Annetta Corsott, are kissing at a lover's lane when they see a meteorite crash beyond the next hill. Steve decides to look for it. An old man, Olin Howland, living nearby finds it first. When he pokes the meteorite with his stick, it breaks open, and a small jelly-like globule inside attaches itself to his hand. In pain and unable to scrape or shake it loose, the old man runs onto the road, where he is nearly struck by Steve's car. Steve and Jane take him to Dr. Holland, Stephen Chase. Dr. Holland anesthetizes the man and sends Steve and Jane back to locate the impact site and gather information. Holland decides he must amputate the man's arm since it is being consumed. Before he can, the blob completely consumes the old man, then Holland's nurse, and finally the doctor himself, all the while continuing to grow. Steve and Jane return in time for Steve to witness the doctor trying to get out the window with the creature on his head. They leave and go to the police station and return with Lieutenant Dave, Earl Rowe, and Sergeant Burt, John Benson. There is no sign, however, of the blob or its victims, and Burt dismisses Steve's story as a teenage prank. Steve and Jane are taken home by their parents, but they later sneak out. In the meantime, the creature consumes a mechanic at a repair shop and grows in size every time it consumes something. At the Colonial Theater, which is showing a midnight screening of Daughter of Horror, Steve recruits Tony, Robert Fields, and some of his friends to warn people about the blob. When Steve notices that his father's grocery store is unlocked, he and Jane go inside. The janitor is nowhere to be seen. Then the couple are cornered by the creature. They seek refuge in the walk-in freezer. The blob oozes in under the door, but quickly retreats. Steve and Jane gather their friends and set off the town's fire and air raid alarms. The townspeople and police still refuse to believe Steve. Meanwhile, the creature enters the Colonial Theater and engulfs and devours the projectionist before oozing into the auditorium. Steve is finally vindicated when screaming people leave the theater in blind panic. Jane, Danny, and Steve become trapped in the diner, along with the manager and a waitress. The blob, now enormous and blood-red from the people it has consumed, has engulfed the building. Dave has a connection made from his police radio to the diner's telephone, telling those in the diner to get into the cellar before they bring down a live power line onto the diner. When the live wire lands, it discharges a massive electrical current into the blob, but it is unaffected and the diner is set ablaze. When the diner manager uses a carbon dioxide extinguisher on the fire, Steve notices that this causes the creature to recoil. Steve remembers that it also retreated from the freezer, saying that's why it didn't come in the ice box after us. It can't stand cold. Shouting in hopes of being picked up on the open phone line, Steve tells Dave about the blob's vulnerability to cold. Jane's father, Mr. Martin, Albert Smith, leads Steve's friends to the high school to retrieve the 20 fire extinguishers there. Returning, the brigade of fire extinguisher-armed students and police first drive the creature away from the diner, then freeze it, saving Steve, Jane, and the others. Dave requests authorities send an Air Force heavy-lift cargo aircraft to transport the blob to the Arctic, where it is later parachuted down to the ice and snowpack. Dave says that while the creature is not dead, at least it has been stopped. To this, Steve Andrews replies, "Yeah, as long as the Arctic stays cold." The film ends with the words "the end," which then morph into a question mark. Next we watched the sequel for it from 1978, Beware. The Blob. Picking up 15 years after the events of the first movie The Blob, an oil pipeline layer named Chester, Godfrey Cambridge, returns to his suburban Los Angeles home from the North Pole, bringing with him a small sample of a mysterious frozen substance uncovered by a bulldozer on a job site. Prior to taking the substance to a lab to be analyzed, he places the storage container with the substance in his freezer, but he and his wife Marianne, Marlene Clark, accidentally let it thaw, creating a second blob. It starts by eating a fly, then a kitten, then Marianne, and then Chester himself, while, in an intentional anachronism by the filmmakers, he is watching a television broadcast of the film The Blob. Lisa, Gwyn Guilford, a friend, walks in to see Chester being consumed by the blob. She escapes, but cannot get anyone to believe her, not even her boyfriend Bobby, Robert Walker Jr. Meanwhile, the rapidly growing creature quietly preys upon the town. Some of its victims include a police officer and two hippies, Cindy Williams and Randy Stonehill, in a storm drain, a barber, Shelley Berman, and his client, transients, played by director Hagman, Burgess Meredith, and Del Close, a scoutmaster, Dick Van Patten, a farm full of chickens and horses, people in a gas station, and various townspeople who turn up missing. At one point, Lisa and Bobby find themselves trapped in Bobby's truck with the creature attempting to find a way inside. While panicking, the truck's air conditioning is accidentally switched on and the blob retreats because of its vulnerability to cold. The now massive blob then invades a bowling alley and a skating rink, consuming dozens more people in the process. It is finally stopped when Bobby activates the rink's ice mechanism, freezing it. While the frozen blob is being filmed by a television crew, one of the crew's bright lights is positioned on the ground, melting a small portion of it, which oozes toward the sheriff and envelopes his feet as he is speaking on camera to a nationwide television audience. Lastly, we watched the 1988 movie of The Blob. A meteorite crashes near Arbaville, California. An elderly transient discovers, within the sphere, a massive slime mold-like substance that adheres to his hand. 3 high school students, Brian, Meg, and Paul, take him to a hospital. After Brian leaves, Paul witnesses the lower half of the transient melting from exposure to the blob. As he calls for help, the blob drops on top of him. Meg arrives to see Paul being devoured by the growing blob. While she tries freeing him, his arm dissolves off, Meg is thrown against a wall and knocked unconscious, and the blob oozes out of the hospital. After Brian and Meg have unsatisfactory encounters with the police, they meet at a diner where Meg tells Brian about the blob. Brian's disbelief is shattered when the diner's handyman is pulled through a sink drain by the blob. It pursues them to the diner's walk-in freezer, but the blob retreats after entering the freezer. After consuming the diner's owner Fran Hewitt and Sheriff Giller, the blob re-enters the sewers. Meg and Brian return to the police station, where the dispatcher tells them Deputy Briggs is near the meteor landing site. They discover a military operation led by a scientist, Dr. Meadows, who orders the town and the 2 teens quarantined. While Brian escapes, Meg is taken to town where she learns her younger brother, Kevin, is missing. Meg learns he and his friend, Eddie, sneaked into the movie theater. The blob enters the theater, attacking the staff and audience. Meg arrives as the audience flees the theater, rescuing Eddie and Kevin. Brian eavesdrops on Meadows and Jennings talking and learns that the blob is a biological warfare experiment created during the Cold War, launched into space because it was so dangerous. Learning that the blob has entered the sewers, Meadows decide to trap it there, even if that means allowing Meg, Kevin, and Eddie to die. Brian is discovered listening in and evades military personnel by driving his motorcycle into the sewers. In the sewers, Meg and Kevin flee from the blob when it emerges and consumes Eddie. Kevin escapes by scaling a pipe to the surface, and Meg is saved by Brian, who confronts Meadows in front of the townsfolk and Briggs. After failing to convince everyone Brian is contaminated and must die, Meadows attempts to shoot him, but is killed by the blob as it oozes into his chemical suit and drags him into the sewer. Then the blob feasts upon the population, impervious to the military's attempts to stop it, killing Colonel Hargis and multiple others. The town's Reverend Meeker proclaims the scene to be the prophesied end of the world, after which a failed flamethrower attack on the blob sets him ablaze. Meg saves him with a fire extinguisher, and in the process blasts the blob with it. When the monster backs off, she realizes that the blob cannot tolerate cold. The survivors retreat to the town hall and hold the blob off with furniture barricades and fire extinguishers, but it is a losing battle, the blob engulfs half the building and devours Briggs. Brian goes to the town's garage and gets a snowmaker truck that has canisters of liquid nitrogen attached. As the blob is about to consume Meg and her family, Brian shoots snow at the creature, which is angered and knocks the truck over. As the blob surges toward Brian, Meg lures it away from him toward the canisters, which she has rigged with an explosive charge taken from a dying soldier. She tries getting clear, but snags her foot between two pieces of metal, trapping her. Brian regains consciousness and runs over to free her. The blob is about to overrun them when the charge goes off, blowing up the canisters and covering the blob in liquid nitrogen. The creature is flash frozen into a mass of crystallized pieces. Moss Woodley has its remains stored in the town ice house. Later, at a tent meeting church service in a field, Meeker, disfigured by his burns and secretly driven insane, preaches a doomsday sermon resembling the blob's attack. He has a still living piece of the blob, trapped inside a glass jar, to eventually unleash it once more upon the world. When the movies were done, we cheered wildly. Me, that was so awesome. Lainey, it sure was. Lana, that blob was ugly. Lola, didn't we face one that was just like it? Nico, that blob was a Goosebumps monster made on a magic typewriter. This blob was from outer space. Me, yep. I looked up the history of the blob. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The blob comes from a small meteorite which falls on Earth. An old man finds it and pokes the meteorite using a piece of tree branch, making it crack and reveal the small blob inside. He picks up the blob with the branch to observe it, but the blob attaches itself to his right hand. The old man is found by a couple, Steve Andrews and Jane Martin, who take him to Dr. Holland, who realizes that the blob is dissolving the old man and tries to amputate the arm. Unfortunately, before he can do so, the blob dissolves the old man. Dr. Holland realizes that the blob needs to be killed and his nurse Kate pour trichloroacetic acid on it, but the blob soaks it up. Dr. Holland goes into his office to get his gun, leaving Kate behind, who ends up getting devoured by the blob. Dr. Holland shoots at it several times, but the blob is unharmed and goes after the doctor. Steve and Jane return in time to see Dr. Holland being devoured by the blob and try to alert the police, but by then, the blob disappears and the police dismiss the warning as a prank. Meanwhile, the blob consumes a mechanic at a repair shop before going into Steve's father's grocery store, presumably devouring the janitor. Steve and Jane sees the store unlocked and goes to investigate, where they encounter the blob. The blob chases the couple into a freezer, but quickly retreats. The blob later invades the Colonial Theater, first attacking the projectionist before oozing into the auditorium. As people flee the theater in blind panic, Lt. Dave enters the theater and encounters the blob, whom he attempts to kill, but finds that bullets have no effect and retreats, stopping his deputy from entering. Then, the blob emerges, having grown to gigantic size and blood red from the people it has consumed. The blob attacks a diner with Steve, Jane, and her brother Danny trapped inside along with the diner's owner and waitress. The police attempts to fry the blob with a live power line, but it fails and the diner is set ablaze. The blob then starts making its way into the basement, and as the owner tries to put out a fire with a CO2 fire extinguisher, he unintentionally blasts the blob with it. Steve notices the blob backing away from the exhaust and realizes why the blob did not come into the freezer, because the blob cannot tolerate the cold. Steve manages to use the diner's phone to tell Dave the blob's weakness to the cold. The townspeople get all of the CO2 extinguishers that they can find and blasts the blob with them, freezing it solid. Dave then requests an Air Force jet to transport the blob to the Arctic, where it is parachuted onto the ice. Son of Blob. In the sequel, an oil pipeline layer named Chester Hargis returns to his suburban Los Angeles home from the North Pole, bringing with him a small sample of a mysterious frozen substance uncovered by a bulldozer on a job site. Chester places the substance container in his freezer, but his wife, Marion, takes it out after reading that the container contains a specimen. The container pops open and the substance is revealed to be the blob, which thaws out and revives. The blob first consumes a fly that lands on it, then going after Marion's cat, Samuel. When Marion goes outside looking for Samuel, the blob ambushes her. As Chester gets ready to watch a movie, the blob crawls up his seat and patiently waits for Chester to absent-mindedly sit down. Later, Chester's friend, Lisa Clark, walks in to see him being devoured by the blob. She flees to notify the police and her boyfriend Bobby Hartford, but when they investigate Chester's house, the blob has disappeared and Lisa's claims are dismissed. Meanwhile, the blob begins its hunt on the town, with some of its victims being a police officer and presumably 2 hippies in a storm drain, a barber and his client, transients, a scoutmaster, and a farm full of chickens. Later, when Lisa and Bobby drive back to Bobby's farm, the blob descends down to try to get inside Lisa's truck. Despite the two's attempt to escape, the blob covers the truck and squeezes in through the gap in the door. In panic, Lisa accidentally turns on the air conditioner, making the blob retreat, establishing its vulnerability to cold as in the original film, though the characters, also as in the 1958 original, do not immediately make the connection. As Lisa and Bobby's friend, Joe, drives down the road, he sees the now massive blob blocking the path ahead of him and tries to turn around, but he's going too fast to stop and he ends up steering out of control, crashing straight into the blob. Later, Lisa, Bobby, and another friend of theirs, Leslie, drive by and see the blob and Joe's car. Despite Lisa and Bobby's attempt to stop her, Leslie tries to go help Joe, only to end up as the blob's next victim. The blob then invades a bowling alley, where it starts off with a repairman's assistant and then the repairman himself before it starts feeding on the customers. It then oozes into an ice rink where it consumes more people before chasing Lisa, Bobby, and the ice rink manager into the commentator's booth. Bobby attempts to fry the blob with electricity, but it fails, like in the 1959 original. Sheriff Jones and Deputy Davis enter the ice rink and spot the blob. Davis tries to shoot it down with his gun, but it fails and Davis gets eaten. Jones fires a few shots before realizing that bullets are not going to work and flees. Back in the booth, Lisa, the manager, and Bobby get on the counter to avoid the blob, and in the process Bobby almost knocks down a refrigerator and spills out all of the ice onto the floor, making the blob retreat, and Bobby realizes the blob's weakness to cold. Bobby tries to inform the police about the blob's weakness, but fails due to the microphone being busted. Bobby then asks the manager how to freeze the rink and makes his way to the fuse box despite the blob's attempt to catch him, and successfully activates the rink's ice mechanism, freezing it. While the frozen blob is being filmed by a television crew, one of the crew's bright lights that is positioned on the ground melts a small portion of it, which oozes toward Jones and envelopes his feet as he is speaking on camera. The movie ends with a cliffhanger, not knowing if the blob is stopped, as it is about to engulf Jones. The Blob, 1988. The blob's origin is changed, as it is now the result of a military experiment, created by Dr. Christopher Meadows, involving some bacteria being launched into space to be mutated by outer space radiation. In the woods, an elderly transient known the Kin Man sees a meteorite crash onto the ground and goes to investigate. Through a crack on the meteorite, he sees something moving inside and uses a tree branch to poke inside, picking out the small blob, which quickly attaches itself to the Kin Man's hand. The Kin Man then runs around in panic and encounters Brian Flagg. The Kin Man attempts to cut off the hand with the blob attached with an axe, but the blob simply holds it in place and the Kin Man runs off, with Brian chasing after him. The Kin Man eventually runs out into the open road, where he encounters Paul Taylor and Meg Penny, who take him to a hospital. While the Kin Man is left unattended, the blob starts feeding on the Kin Man, which is noticed by Paul, who brings a doctor over, and the two sees that the Kin Man's lower half has been dissolved. Paul then goes to call Sheriff Geller, but the blob sneaks up on him and drops onto him. Paul's scream draws in Meg, who sees Paul enveloped by the blob and tries to save him by pulling on his arm that is not covered by the blob, but Paul's arm melts off and Meg falls unconscious while the blob flees the hospital after dissolving Paul. In the woods, the blob comes across Vicky DeSoto and Scott Jesk in the latter's car. As Scott gets out to prepare a drink to get Vicky drunk, the blob sneaks into the car and gets into Vicky's body, killing her. As Scott gets back in the car, he sees Vicky unresponsive and moves on to unbutton her blouse, but before he can get on with the date rape, Scott gets grabbed by the blob, which comes bursting out of Vicky's body before engulfing Scott. Afterwards, the blob slithers out of the car and enters the sewers. At the town's diner, there is a clog in the kitchen sink, and when the handyman, George, reaches into the drain, he gets a mysterious substance on his fingers, and then, the blob bursts out of the pipe and grabs George by the face before pulling him into the sink drain. The diner owner, Fran Hewitt, along with Brian and Meg, walk in to see George's corpse being dragged into the drain as the blob emerges. The blob chases Brian and Meg into the freezer, but it quickly retreats. Fran manages to get outside and runs into a phone booth to call Sheriff Giller. Unfortunately, she is spotted by the blob, which slowly starts covering the phone booth. When Fran manages to get a hold of the sheriff's office, she learns that Sheriff Geller is not present, and that's when the blob presents her with Sheriff Geller's dissolving corpse. Fran screams at the sight as the blob bursts into the phone booth and captures her. Afterwards, the blob re-enters the sewers while Reverend Meeker sees the creature and goes over to the diner to investigate, where he sees the frozen pieces of the blob that were left behind and puts them in a glass jar. At the theater, a projectionist named Phil Hobbs is relaxing and playing with a yo-yo in the projection room when it starts getting hot in the room. After calling the theater manager, Hobbs looks into the vents where he gets ambushed by the blob. The manager comes into the room looking for Hobbs, when he sees Hobbs's yo-yo come down from the ceiling. The manager looks up to see Hobbs being digested by the blob before the manager himself gets snatched up by the blob. Afterwards, the blob enters the auditorium and begins its carnage with a rude patron that keeps talking and acting disrespectful. Meg runs into the theater to look for her brother, Kevin, and his friend, Eddie. When she enters the room, she witnesses the audience fleeing in panic along with the blob snatching up some unfortunate victims, including a woman with her head half dissolved. Meg manages to reach Kevin and Eddie and direct them towards the emergency exit with the blob in hot pursuit. The three manage to get out of the theater, but they are forced to go into the sewers when they encounter a dead end. In the sewers, Meg, Kevin, and Eddie reach an area they can use to get out, but the blob catches up to them and manages to catch Eddie. Meg tries to save him, but fails and is forced to run as the blob closes in on her and Kevin. However, the blob gets distracted by three of Meadows's men attacking it, and Meg is able to get Kevin to safety while Brian comes by and saves Meg. After barely dodging the blob, the two encounter one soldier that survived the blob's attack on his group. He leads the two to an exit, but Meadows has the exit blocked, and Brian uses the soldier's rocket launcher to blow the exit open. As Meadows is about to kill Brian to cover up his crime of creating the blob, the said creature grabs its creator and drags him toward the manhole. Meadows is able to grab onto the edge, but the blob oozes inside his suit, and after a struggle, Meadows is dragged into the sewer, eaten by his own creation. Following Meadows's death, Colonel Hargis has his men riddle the blob with bullets and drops in a satchel charge for good measure. However, this only angers the blob as it comes bursting out of the sewer. It crushes Hargis and then starts targeting the townspeople. The townspeople flee from the blob, and it chases after them, snatching up a few unfortunate victims. Reverend Meeker sees the ensuing carnage and believes it to be prophecy. A soldier attempts to attack with a flamethrower, but the blob simply jams the nozzle with a tentacle, causing the flamethrower to backfire and burn the soldier, as well as Meeker, who gets caught in the backdraft. Meg gets a CO2 fire extinguisher to save him and instinctively blasts the blob with it when it moves in for an attack, causing the blob to back off. Meg realizes the blob's weakness to the cold and uses the extinguisher to keep the blob at bay as she and the other survivors barricade themselves in the city hall. The blob attempts get inside, but the townspeople hold it off with furniture barricades and CO2 extinguishers, but it is a losing battle and Deputy Briggs is killed. Meanwhile, Brian gets a snowmaker truck and uses it to shoot snow at the blob. The blob gets angry and turns its attention towards him and flips the truck over, knocking off its liquid nitrogen canisters. Meg sees Brian in danger and goes to help him. She takes a satchel charge and an M16 rifle from a dying soldier. As the blob tries to get into the truck, Meg shoots the blob to distract it from Brian and rigs the canisters with explosive charges. However, she ends up getting her foot caught. Fortunately, Brian recovers and is able to get Meg to safety as the blob engulfs the canisters and gets doused by liquid nitrogen when the canisters explode. The blob is flash frozen and shatters into millions of crystallized pieces. Moss Woodley then calls for its remains to be stored in the town's ice house. However, this is not the end of the blob, as Meeker, who was disfigured and driven insane by the attack, preaches for the Day of Reckoning, commonly known as the Apocalypse. When asked about when it will happen, Meeker replies when the Lord gives him a sign, as he holds up the jar containing the small piece of the blob that he found, which is revealed to be still alive as it moves around in the jar. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Me? Whoa. This blob is a creature of terror. Nico? No kidding. Maria? Okay. The blob will probably be immune to physical attacks. But water should affect it. Me? Water won't begin to cut it. Our best chance is to freeze it solid and then throw it right into the sun where it will be completely obliterated in a flash. Lana? I can do that. Nico? I can use EIS Shenron's powers to freeze it. Iceman? Marvel, I'll help out. Then a news report came on. News announcer, we interrupt this program to bring you this special report. News reporter, the town of Arbaville in California is under attack by a massive living blob of jelly. It's eating and killing anything that it touches. Me, the blob. We got to get over there. This looks like a job for Team Loud Phoenix Storm. We were off to Arbaville, California. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Arbaville, California. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. We were flying to Arbaville. William, we need to find a way to kill the blob before it takes any more lives. Me, we're gonna first freeze it solid and then we're gonna send it into the sun where it will be completely obliterated. Then we're gonna deal with that fucked up lunatic minister Reverend Jacob Meeker. We arrived at the town and we saw the blob. It was an ugly magenta mass of slime and it was gross. Me, that is disgusting. Lainey, that is gross. Me, let's get it guys. We went at the blob. Iceman, Marvel, this blob needs to chill. Shoots ice beam at it. It roared in pain as it was being frozen. Lana, this blob is gross. Not that I mind anyway. Lana fired a powerful blast of ice lightning at it and froze part of it. Nico, this ugly blob of slime has failed this universe. The 3-star Dragon Ball on his necklace glowed and he fired a powerful green energy beam from his eyes and froze part of it and it roared in pain. We were blasting it with freeze rays, ice powers, and more as we froze it. With us was Steve Andrews, who warned the town about the blob and he was helping in getting everyone to safety. Steve A, this way guys. Hurry. Everyone was running for their lives and running fast. We were blasting the blob with freeze powers and more and it was a powerful battle. Steve then fired his freeze powers at the blob and froze it. Me, great job Steve. We blasted the blob all over. Me, let's finish it with some teamwork. Overkill, you got it boss. Cyber key power. The animatron cyber planet key went into his back and it enhanced his strength and missile blasters 100-fold. Starman, time for some pain. Giganteon cyber key power. The Giganteon cyber planet key went into his right arm and it enhanced his star crash 1,000-fold. Starman and Overkill, Starstorm missile barrage. Starman fired a wheel of stars and Overkill fired a bunch of missiles and they combined and they hit the blob and exploded. Jazz, let's do it. Cyber key power. The Autobot cyber planet key went into his right arm and it enhanced his weapons 100-fold. Katara, let's freeze this blob. Giganteon cyber key power. The Giganteon cyber planet key went into her right arm device and it enhanced her water bending powers 100-fold. Jazz and Katara, Arctic Photon Burst. Katara fired numerous blades of ice and Jazz fired a powerful barrage of photons and they hit the blob and it roared in pain. Me, let's finish this blob once and for all. Nicole, open the portal into the sun. Nicole, you got it, Dad. Nicole opened the portal that was really close to the sun. Me, let's final smash this jelly freak. Lana, roger that. Arctic lightning firestorm. Lana fired a powerful blast of ice lightning and it froze part of the blob. Steve A, let's do this. Nitrogen freeze burst. Steve Andrews fired a massive blast of liquid nitrogen and it froze part of the blob. May, this will finish it. Absolute zero deluge. May fired a powerful blast of cold fire at 459.67 Fahrenheit and it completely froze the blob into crystal. The portal sucked in the blob crystals and there was nothing left of it as they flew into the sun and were completely obliterated in an instant. Me, that's it for that ugly freak. Nico, yep. Now we have one more thing to do. We went to face Reverend Meeker. He was now insane. Meeker, insane laughter. I will enjoy watching you all die. Me, 3 words Meeker, go fuck yourself. Steve Andrews, laughs, don't worry, Meeker. I'm sure the Saturn prison cafeteria will keep you fed. Me, you got that right. Meeker was sentenced to spend the rest of his miserable life in the Saturn Insane Asylum in solitary confinement. Lana, to the viewers, not even a monster like the Blob is a match for the power of Team Loud Phoenix Storm. Nico caught a Tapu Fini and a Solgaleo. We went back home and rested. The end. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Another fanfiction complete and part 3 of the 13 Days of Horror complete. The Blob from 1958 was an awesome horror movie from my dad's past. It was a weird and gross movie. The one from 1988 was scary. But great movies nonetheless. Nico-chan 11 gave me the ideas for this. Thanks man. Part 4 is Silent Hill and we're gonna face the Evil Order cult and make sure that they all die. Let me know what you all think. See you all next time.